In letter number 7, Screwtape is telling Wormwood, we have to look for ways to push this guy one way or the other with regard to pacifism or extreme patriotism. We want to push him to an extreme. Now before that, they talk a little bit about whether or not devils should make themselves known. Evidently Wormwood in his letter has asked something to the effect of, hey, should I kind of let them know I'm there? And the policy that they are operating under now is don't reveal yourself. Don't let the patient know you're there. Now, in earlier eras that were much more religious, people were aware of the devil. When you look at early Christian art, when you look at medieval art, Renaissance art, the devil, hell, judgment, these are things that are throughout as themes, as parts of the very Christian imagination. As you get into the modern world, of course the existence of the devil becomes dubious, becomes something that is believed to be merely cultural or imaginative. It's a much more materialist age. Materialist again in the sense of denying that there are spiritual beings, denying that there's a soul, that there are spirits that exist outside a body, that there's a God. That tends to be much more of our outlook now. Screwtape says that there are trade-offs one era to the next. In an earlier age when people believe that there are devils, you can get people to make pacts with the devils. Remember, that's what a magician is. It's not David Copperfield in the amazing world of illusion. It's somebody who's willing to sell their soul for some kind of supernatural power. Obviously, in an age that believes in the devil, you can get people to do that. But in an age that no longer believes in a devil, you're not going to get magicians. You're not going to get people who are going to sell their soul for supernatural powers. But conversely, because they don't believe in spirits, they don't believe you're there. So there is that advantage. You get to work on people and they don't have an awareness that you're working. That's great espionage work. Espionage, remember, is not showing up like James Bond and being the best looking guy in the room. Espionage is blending. It's people not even suspecting that you have the role or job that in fact you do. And that is the clear advantage in a modern age for devils working. People don't know they're there. Ideally, Screwtape says, we would have people who on the one hand don't believe in devils, but on the other hand are seeking some kind of supernatural power through science. The ideal would be what he calls a materialist magician. Now I think many readers look at that and they have no idea what that could mean. In the modern sense, I don't know, but if you think back to the 1970s, remember all that stuff with parapsychology and ESP and telepathy and telekinesis and people claiming that they could melt spoons in their hands by their own touch? That's a way of seeking for occult power with a kind of label of it being scientific. And that's the kind of thing I think that Lewis is talking about, where you're looking for the supernatural under the label of science. Well, what is it that Screwtape recommends with regard to pacifism or extreme patriotism? Always, Screwtape says, we want to encourage divisions within Christianity. And by this, Screwtape is not just thinking about denominational differences. For example, Anglican versus Catholic, Catholic versus Lutheran, Lutheran versus evangelical. No, even better than that is having the divisions that arise within a denomination. So within Lewis's Anglican communion, there would be high Anglicans and low Anglicans. High Anglicans, people who are more traditional in terms of ritual, in terms of practice. Low Anglicans, people who are more toward the Protestant end of the spectrum. So a kind of de-emphasis on ritual and more emphasis on preaching of the Bible. Okay? So those kinds of things are the kinds of things, Screwtape says, that we need to exacerbate, that we need to exaggerate, that we need to push. Because these are the kinds of things that are going to split people into factions. They're going to split people into little groups that will then be, within those groups, mutually admiring each other and detesting the others. It's a scandal within Christianity that people divide up in this way. And it's something, of course, that has to be overcome. When you look at the letters of Paul, it's very clear that it's always been this way. There have always been these tendencies to break into groups that one group saw itself as better than the other, and they could be divided up about things that were actually indifferent. They're actually not even essential to the practice of Christianity. Now, with pacifism, you have something that within England is bound to be a minority belief and also bound to be a very unpopular belief, especially during wartime. So you want to put him into a group of Christian pacifists where they are shrill, they are self-righteous, they are supporting each other, and they are separating themselves from really the wider communion and wider tradition of Christian belief. Lewis is not condemning pacifism as such, any more than he condemns patriotism as such. What he's focusing on is the ways in which we can take things that divide us as Christians, and even within a Christian communion, and amplify that to the detriment of the love of God and the love of neighbor. One of the things that I think is important as we try to make sense of Screwtape's advice to make him an extreme patriot or make him a pacifist, we have to remember that Christianity is not just a matter of faith. That is, we can express what Christianity is in terms of a commitment to Christ, and that commitment is a commitment of faith. But we also have to remember that the end of faith and the end of that commitment is ultimately love. That we love God with our whole soul, with our whole heart, with our whole strength, and that we love our neighbor as ourself in God. So what Screwtape wants to do is to erode that love, erode that perfection of Christian faith. Whether you're trying to make the patient a pacifist or whether you're trying to make him an extreme patriot, the pattern to corrupting the patient is the same. You want to encourage the patient in a direction of an extreme, so that at first the patient will be a pacifist, let us say, and it's a part of his religion. Then it's the most important part of his religion. Then religion is merely a part of the cause. That in fact Christianity becomes useful because it is a support for pacifism. Notice the stages, from part to most important part to really bigger than Christianity. What you're doing is making God smaller and smaller, lower and lower as a priority, so that you're making God a means for now this political agenda. Whatever, should Christianity guide us and help us in our social and political life? Of course it should. But what Lewis points to is the subtle way in which a social or political agenda can become more important, can become number one, and God somehow becomes 2 or 3 or 4. Well, in our next letter, we want to look at what Screwtape describes as the law of undulation, the law of change. And in fact, in the next 2 letters, we're going to see how God works with this law of undulation in the human soul, and then how Screwtape and the devils work with this law of undulation.